Well, let us start to the year for the U.S. This is, particularly California. I managed to miraculously dodge a bunch of wildfires and crazy winds in the surrounding area, although at the time I'm recording this, we're supposed to get more. So hopefully I'll survive those. And hopefully we'll also collectively survive our new presidency. This has been a week, to say the least. But here I am to talk about if the shows and movies and games and stories in general I watch as a guy in my mid-30s made me feel something or not, because sure. So, Lemon Bun, as I call them, asked a question about, and I quote, "Are there any pieces of media you enjoy despite them being very flawed or just plain bad, or even because they're bad? Conversely, are there any you didn't enjoy despite them being objectively good/popular?" So, I've actually been thinking about this a lot, which is part of why I picked this topic. This topic, excuse me. And I I've gone through a lot of phases of really thinking about what it is that I'm consuming and how much it's impacting me and how much it's having a positive or negative influence on me and how my tastes are changing and evolving and etc. When I was a kid, as often is the case, I didn't care. I just liked whatever I liked and watched whatever I watched and enjoyed whatever I enjoyed, or didn't enjoy whatever I didn't enjoy, and yada yada. But by the time that I hit high school and I started taking myself a little more seriously as an artist, and by the time, especially when I hit college, and because I was going to an art school for animation specifically, and I was surrounded by a lot more critical thinking people about the stuff we were watching and everything. There were some rapid changes happening. I know particularly a big turning point for me was when I started getting into anime, because then it became not just I'm watching a cartoon and just the episode is the episode. Then it became like, okay, the story experience. I was thinking about shows the way I was thinking about movies, or starting to think about movies. They were making me think more about like, what am I taking away from this? Like what is, why do I like certain characters more than others? Like what is it that's really affecting me differently? You know what I mean? And when I started meeting a lot more friends that were artists that wanted to work professionally, and they were studying different things and thinking about different things, then I started to kind of open my mind up a lot more. And it got to a point where I was like, kind of having, and it's funny because this even kind of reflected my my tastes and my ability to do voiceover, because then I was thinking about, in the same way that like, what is animation that is good or bad that does I think is executed well, and then that I genuinely enjoy, and then what is stuff that is of higher quality but maybe I'm just like not into, like I just don't. Like, for some reason, I'm not like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever, right? And in starting to think about those things, I was realizing, over the course of years, I was like, oh man, like, it's one thing, I think it is good to be critical about what it is that you consume, but then there's a little bit of like a middle ground you have to find, because if you don't, you're just gonna hate everything, and then you're not gonna be. And it's funny, at the time I'm recording this, I'm going through a little bit of a South Park kick. People that have followed my work for a long time know that I go through little mini hyperfixation bursts over the years. And there's certain ones that I come back to. It's, oh, I'm in my, Thomas the Tank Engine hyperfixation little stint for 2 seconds. And now I'm in my South Park one. So I went back and I watched a lot of episodes and some of the specials and movies and, various things. And, South Park is one of those things in particular where it's like, oh, like the animation's crappy, basically on purpose, but like the writing and stories and characters are so good, and I'm so invested into the world that it like I see past that, and like I can look back at like, oh, these are episodes that still I hold very dear. And it's funny because they, Trey and Matt, they talk all the time about how, like they will talk about stuff that has a point to it, and some kind of like deeper message that matters, but then it'll also come back to like fart jokes and Cartman wanting Kyle to suck his balls because he proved that a leprechaun is real. So I feel like, if anything, South Park's kind of the ultimate example of exactly what it is I'm talking about. But two particular things in general that I look at that kind of with this sort of lens of what Lemon Bun's point about is Dragon Ball and Sonic, where I have, as probably a lot of people know, and as probably a lot of people relate to this, those are franchises that often one has a very love-hate relationship with, where it's like, I love this. I love, most of the source material in the case of Dragon Ball and some of the newer stuff. And with Sonic, it's like, I like certain things, I like certain characters, I like certain media with these characters and these stories and these worlds and stuff. But often there will be this sense of like, oh God, I hate, it's literally like my friends joke about how like their kind of go-to impression of me lately is like, God, I love Dragon Ball. God, I hate Dragon Ball. Like there's so much that comes with that. And even, looking at the most recent stuff that's happened with, Sonic 3 and Dragon Ball Daima, where I really enjoyed both of those things. And there's something about them that I'll get to kind of a bigger point about this, where, Sonic has been kind of in the toilet, for most fans for many years. And even like the better stuff, like have just been like, baby steps and things, some of which I've experienced hands-on, some of which I haven't. Like I watched my friend play through all of Frontiers. I didn't play Frontiers myself. And I'm like, this is good. This is a step in the right direction. I also don't think I would have wanted to spend the money on getting this entire game necessarily. But I went to go see Sonic 3 in theaters, opening night, and I really enjoyed it. But literally after I watched it, because I'm like, my whole thing, here's my review, my one sentence. Sonic Adventure 2, done better. Literally, that's the movie. Although I was sad there was no Rouge, and not for the reasons that you're thinking. I just think that she could have fulfilled the role of what the human characters were doing, because I don't give a shit about the human characters. Nonetheless, I was like, yeah, this is like so many aspects, like the kind of building blocks of the story of Sonic Adventure 2 and the dynamic with Shadow and Sonic and everything, like all these things, and executed in a way that was better. That was honestly, in my opinion, done better. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I was, freaking out and oh my God, and then Live and Learn plays and and then this reference, etc. was great. But I stop and I think to myself, the first phase of, am I excited about this and do I like this because I'm a Sonic fan? But I am a critical Sonic fan. So the fact that I'm enjoying this despite that, is that not a sign that that's a good thing and that like it was done well and that it made me, it enjoyed. But then I also think to myself still, I'm like, because the first two movies, they were fine, but they were just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm not like jumping out of my seat to go back and watch them again necessarily. But with 3, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to watch this again when it's on digital, right? But I have that reflection of like, is it, because I love Sonic Adventure 2 specifically. That was a big, game that was one of my all-time favorites. But I look back at it, here's a perfect example, and I'm going to give a mild spoiler about something. Mild spoiler. So in the game, Amy is the one that's like, Shadow, like humans are basically good, like don't let them die. And then he remembers what Maria actually said before she died, and then he like goes off to help save the day. I look back at that and I'm like, wow, this is really badly written and badly executed, and I feel nothing, even though I like Amy. But like in that scene, like her contribution to that is just like, this feels really hokey and it doesn't do anything for me. And you're going to think I'm insane for saying this. The Sonic X version, even though I hate Chris, the way that it's executed in Sonic X made me feel something more than the original game, which is so bizarre. And I'll just say, the equivalent of that scene, I won't even say who the character is or how it goes, it's a different situation, but that equivalent scene of Shadow having a turn where he's like, what have I done? And then suddenly, he's like, oh, okay. And then he goes to help save the day and stuff. It's executed so much better. It makes so much sense. It's like, it's logical. It's like, well, like directed and everything. It's like, I love that. Right. And it made me feel something. And I look back at like, the entirety of Sonic Frontiers. And I'm like, this is good. This is a step in the right direction. This doesn't make me feel anything. In fact, possibly the last Sonic thing that made me feel something in that kind of way. No, I like Generations. That's not true. Generations was just like, because it was pure fun. But I remember in terms of like a story thing, weirdly enough, it's the scene with Shadow and Rouge in Sonic 06 where he finds out that in the future he's like imprisoned because everybody thinks that he's the reason that the world ended. And Rouge is like, no matter if the whole world turns against you, I'll always be here for you. Remember that. And I'm like, wow, that still affects me, even though it's horribly mocapped. It looks bad. The performances are bad. The music is bad. But for some reason, that interaction like made me feel something. It's so bizarre. And that goes to my overall point in this. Now I'm looking at media, and now I'm like, sure, I could enjoy something on a surface level. I can be like, that was really funny. That was really well animated. That was really well performed. Does it make me feel something? I watched, and I know it's a bit of a controversial topic, and I'm not going to get into that whole thing, but I watched Lovely Complex recently, and it's hysterically funny. I don't think I've laughed that hard at an anime in a really long time. A really, really, really long time. Like every single episode I was laughing out loud like at least like 3 times. It was so funny, right? And I was like, wow, an anime has even anime that I love so much has not made me laugh that hard. Like just purely like that emotion, right? And some of the romantic shows that like, you know, some like the other like romantic shows like that have like really gotten me because I'm a sap, you know, when it comes to watching that kind of stuff. And even the action kind of shows where like, you know, this past My Hero season was the best I've seen in a very long time. Very, very, very long time. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. You know, but then like on Daima, for example. So like I've enjoyed most of the new Dragon Ball movies. Having now watched Super 3 times, I look back and I'm like, I don't like Super that much. I don't. There's parts of it that are like, that was cool. But overall, I'm like, nah. But I can go back and watch Z a million times. A million times. I can go back and watch, I should clarify, Kai, the Kai version of Z. Or the manga, which I'm now collecting for the first time. I'm finally collecting the Z manga for the first time. And I just finished collecting all the the 3-in-1 volumes. So I have the entirety of that, which is great. But I can sit here and go back and I could write an essay on like how Z is good. Like genuinely, I can do that. And like why it's like a good story and why the characters are good and why it makes me feel something still to this day, right? Because also it's funny. There are, on that same note, there are shows and games and movies that I go back to that I'm like, oh, okay, what was this that I was into, and does it still hold up? And there are certain things where I'm like, wow, this is still like some of the Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and shows that I watched, or Disney movies, certain Disney movies, where like that still holds up. And there's other ones where I'm like, no, like Disney movies that were like some of my favorites as a kid, and then I look at them now and I'm like, they're okay, they're whatever. Even I had kind of an aha moment with Zootopia, which was my favorite movie of all time, right? And then, and part of the reason I loved it so much is because I thought the message of it was incredibly powerful. But then I started talking to a lot of, especially folks that are like marginalized and people of color and, you know, people of different sexualities and stuff. And they had different opinions about the message, and they gave me a different perspective, and that changed my opinion of that aspect of the film, right? But then I watched Elementals, and I was like, oh, this executes that part of the message of Zootopia about like the prejudice stuff a million times better than Zootopia does. And it's super cute. And I love the romance between Amber and Wade. Like, oh my God. Cause even though I ship Judy and Nick super hard, it wasn't a romance story, but Elementals was. So, but I loved it so much. Elementals was amazing and was way underappreciated. That said, I went back and I rewatched Zootopia just off the cuff. And I was reminded, I like this movie more. I do have a different opinion about it now, but it's so exciting. It's so exciting all the way through. It's so exciting, and I love it so much. And I cannot wait for the second one. And I just, like, a month ago, I finally watched Zootopia Plus. And I'm like, I was immediately reminded, like, this is everything, like, every aspect of this I love. You know, even with that new perspective about, okay, yeah, the message about the, you know, prejudice and racial relations and, you know, fear and all that stuff. No, not executed the best as it could be, but I love all the characters so much. They make me feel something. Back on the Dragon Ball note, because I got off topic there for a second, I'm watching Daima. I think a couple big reasons why I'm liking Daima right now. We're about a little over halfway through, allegedly, right now. I love the animation. I love the lore drops. I like the group of main characters for the most part. I'm waiting for Glorio to get a little bit more interesting than he is, because he doesn't have a whole lot to him. Sad to say. I want to like him. I like Pansy more, and I like the minis of all of them. Even Hibis who's silly. Hibis is making me laugh more. And I want more Goma and more Degasu, because I fell in love with them, like scene 1 of that of that first episode. And I love the juicy, tasty lore drops. Like, I'm all about that. But I keep wondering, same thing. I'm like, with the Sonic bit as well, do I like this just because it's Dragon Ball? Am I compromising about, like, you know, am I looking for reasons to like this, or do I actually like this? Is this genuinely good? You know? And I don't know. I've even, here's a crazy example, because I talked about the One Piece live action show last year when the first season, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, when the first season came out. And I've been recommending it to people now that don't necessarily want to get into the anime, but are interested in it, and I recommend them the live action show because it's genuinely good. And there's things about it that made me feel more intense emotions than even the source material, even the manga or the anime does. And that made me think, I'm a little scared that I'm even getting to a point where live action is making me feel something more commonly than animation is in general. Because even if that's a product that's just getting older and becoming more jaded, I don't want that to redefine my taste completely. But, like, a thing I noticed in particular that I keep holding everything to is Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Now, that's almost an unfair comparison, because those are two of, you know, arguably the greatest stories ever written, let alone the greatest TV shows, greatest stories ever written, right? But often when I see something that it's just okay, I'm like, well, it could have been better. You know, it could have been executed better. And not everything has to be Breaking Bad. Not everything has to be the best of the best of the best, because not everything is going to be the best of the best. But now that, like, I've experienced other things that were, like, you know, because Breaking Bad probably isn't a show I would have watched had I gone out of my way. It was recommended to me to check it out. And I was like, okay. And so I gave it a shot, and then became a big fan. And then when it was already, I believe it was already over by the time I was getting into it. And then I caught up with Better Call Saul and then followed it up through, sorry, it's the smoke getting to me. Yeah, I use those as kind of this measuring stick, about, the actual, like, level of quality of anything now. I was saying earlier about there's old stuff I've rewatched that I think still holds up tremendously well and still gives me feelings of satisfaction that, like, the magic hasn't died on this. There's other stuff I've grown up with that doesn't hold up the same way I thought. And even, I mentioned that before, but even specifically stuff that I thought was, like, funny bad, like the old live action Mario movie. I showed that to a friend of mine before I went to go watch the animated Mario movie, because I knew, like, it's bad. I knew it's bad, but it's, like, funny bad. And then very quickly we realized, oh no, it's just bad. Like, this is not enjoyable, like, period. And honestly, I think that even if I made my friends suffer that have never seen Dragon Ball Evolution, if they suffered through it, like, haha, let's laugh at it. It's like, I don't even think they'd be laughing. I think that they would just be suffering, you know? So, this is another crazy one. And, I think maybe I might have talked about this on, maybe maybe some other Kirblog earlier this year. Or maybe no, not this year. I forget. We're into 2025 now, kids. Haha. But maybe at some point last year when I was watching through all the cutscenes of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on like big giant videos and stuff. Oh, okay. So I didn't experience Final Fantasy VII. I know who all the characters are. I knew basic things about the story and the world. But I'd never fully experienced it. I've only seen Advent Children. So then, when Remake came out, I was like, oh, I should get into this. And so finally, one day, I went ahead and I watched a big, like, 10-hour movie of all the cutscenes from the whole entire game. And, god damn. And I realized something. Because while I didn't grow up with Final Fantasy VII, I did grow up with Kingdom Hearts, which were both Nomura stories. So, yeah, it suddenly dawned on me, wow, Kingdom Hearts is watered down, kidified Final Fantasy VII in certain aspects. Especially by the time it gets to Chain of Memories and 2. Like, after the first one, where it's just like, haha, random Disney adventure, whatever. But everything past that, when they start introducing, like, the nobodies and the organization and all this, like, crazy lore stuff and all the hyper-complicated things that people take the piss out of Kingdom Hearts about, it's Final Fantasy VII watered down for kids. That's what it is. But then, watching the cutscenes of 7 Remake, where it's, like, fully produced and looks beautiful and, like, you know, this really high budget, like mocap and like beautifully animated stuff and beautifully rendered areas and amazing, you know, remixes of all the music and like a better executed, much like Sonic 3 was a better executed version of Sonic Adventure 2, a better executed version of 7. It's not only a better executed version of the original 7 material, it's also a better executed version of Kingdom Hearts. Like overall, like it was making me feel things that Kingdom Hearts had rarely made me feel. There was a bit, I will only say it involves the Birth by Sleep trio in Kingdom Hearts 3. Go back and if you want to watch my old stuff about Kingdom Hearts 3 when that was new at the time, that I bawled over. That just hit me so hard. And I love that game. I think it's the best Kingdom Hearts game. Absolutely. So there's something that apparently everybody else seems to hate that I love. I think it's the best Kingdom Hearts game. Like, absolutely, without question. But then watch it, and I only watched, I didn't even play 7 Remake and Rebirth, let alone the original. But the whole time, I'm like, I'm so invested. Even with my critiques about, like, okay, sometimes I don't know what the tone, I made a TikTok about, like, I don't know what the tone is supposed to be all the time. It's like, is this supposed to be realistic? Is this supposed to be cartoony? I don't know. I'm not sure if it's sure, and certain performances that make it weird to tell that sometimes take me out of the experience a little bit. There's something about modern Final Fantasy that's very difficult to suspend my disbelief, which goes to show something. Modern Final Fantasy, I've seen cutscenes from previous games and now all the ones from 7 Remake and Rebirth. There's something about the hyper-realistic modern Final Fantasy games that there is a disconnect that makes it a little difficult for me to fully suspend my disbelief with these characters. But despite that, I was so invested in everything in 7. And End of Rebirth, oh my god, I cried a lot. For what is one of the most known things in video game history that I knew was coming, and I was like, oh, wow. And it hit me so hard. I still think about it. God damn. But that made me realize I was like, but I'm a Kingdom Hearts fan more than I am a Final Fantasy VII fan. And now I'm like, oh no, this is better. You know, it's weird. It's this weird dynamic that I have with it. So it's strange. Like I've had trouble finding this balance of just enjoying things for what they are, being critical of things, especially if it's things that I know I'm a fan of. I try to be a lot more critical. I try to see the beauty in things as much as I can. I try to acknowledge if it's something that I know is not that great. I traded Christmas movies with folks this past holiday with a few friends, and they showed me Elf because I had never seen Elf before, and I showed them Jingle All the Way because they'd never seen that before, and I was like, I hope this is still as funny as I remembered it, and it was, and they were all the people who hadn't seen it before were dying laughing, and I was like, oh, thank God, okay. So because even I don't know my own tastes. I don't know if I have good tastes or not. I just know that they're mine, for better or worse, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if anything, sometimes it is important when you're an artist, it is important to be conscious of your tastes, because if you want, and as any kind of artist, not even just as like a visual artist or an animator, even as an actor, as a musician, I think it is important to absorb a lot and to think about it a lot and really analyze, why do I like this so much? What is it about this that is, doing it for me, or is it junk food? Is it objectively bad, but I like it anyway? And can I explain, why I do like it, even if it is objectively bad in some way? I think that it is important to do that, especially if you are an artist. I think that being able to break those things down, because for the sake of you being able to improve your own art, I think is good. But there is also nothing wrong with having stuff that is just junk food that is going to be crap. But I also think that knowing that, and at the same time being like, yeah, but I should acknowledge what is the best of the best stuff. Like we were trying to figure out, I remember some friends of mine were trying to figure out what are like 10 out of 10 anime. Because like we saw like everybody was like, oh my God, Free Ren is as good as Full Metal Alchemist. And I watched like 18 episodes worth. And I'm like, it's not. It didn't do anything for me, which I know is a very spicy hot take, but I felt way more out of Dungeon Meshi than I did out of Free Ren, honestly. But we tried to think of like what are like a bunch of 10 out of 10 shows, and we picked a bunch. But even then, another friend of mine pointed out, but even then, like those 10 out of 10s, they have things that you would take points off, like Death Note. It's like people have valid criticisms about the second half of Death Note, which is otherwise a 10 out of 10 show. So do 10 out of 10 things really exist? Because that still comes down to tastes, It's so hard to be able to determine that. It's a constant thing that you have to question, but if you question it too much, then you drive yourself insane, and then you hate everything and you don't enjoy anything. And I've met people that have gotten to that point that just don't enjoy anything, and then they just don't consume anything like that anymore. And then they just like, they only watch like, shorts and whatever. They're not even consuming like, stories in their media anymore. They're just consuming like, like YouTube or TikTok, junk food type, short stuff. There's nothing wrong with that either. But that when that's like all you're watching, or like, like cooking shows or, whatever, and you're not experiencing stories anymore, that's what I don't want to get to. That's what I don't want to get to anymore, is I don't want to be bored of all stories. I don't want to be bored of all storytelling and all executions and all, matter of that. I don't want to get to that point, because then I would feel, then personally I feel like a normie, and I don't want to get to that point. So, but I challenge you all in the comments. One bad, quote unquote, bad thing you still like, and one thing that you liked that you now think is bad, and show your work. Tell me why. But, yeah. So, I'm putting the Patreon stuff at the end here. So, therefore, this Kirblog topic was suggested by Leprode. If you'd like to suggest topics for videos like these, and if you want to hear me record them in my community Discord server before my release, please consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/Kirbifer. Every little bit helps pay my bills and expenses, and paying other artists to help me with things. Any little bit helps, even just as simple as $1 a month or $3 a month. You can suggest a Kirblog topic like this, or for $10 a month, you can join our Discord server. And I do monthly hangouts. We've got a few folks in here right now while I'm recording this. And I post all my work in progress stuff way ahead of time in there, so you can see what I'm working on ahead of time. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you in the next one. And let's hope that we can all get through this. For those of you who are living in America, stay strong. We'll get through this together, whatever it takes. And don't crumble, because I'm not. See y'all later.